In Unit 1, the very last writing portion is a melody harmonization. Here's the melody, and the directions say to use only 1 and 5 chords, tonic and dominant only. We're going to write for SATB choir, use 2 cadences, add a couple passing and a couple neighboring tones. So let's start here with 2 cadences. As you know, I like to go for the goal first. Well, I've got 8 measures. 1, 2, 3, 4. It would be fairly natural to break it off there. Let's see how this sounds if we were to do that. Okay, that sounds like a half cadence, potentially. So we'll want to put, to make it sound that way, we'll want to put a 5 chord there. And so from there we could make another phrase. With that 3-2-1 pattern, depending on that one, we'll end up with a PAC here. Now, when you write a PAC, a perfect authentic cadence, you need to have root position 5 going to root position 1. If you do anything else, if you invert these chords, the 5 or the 1 or both, you'll end up creating too much instability and making it sound as if it weren't a cadence in the first place. So this really is an important thing that the 5 and the 1 be in root position. Same thing here. If this 5 were inverted, it would not sound like a half cadence. It would push right on through. It would be so unstable it would want to hear, okay, where's the resolution going? And that would incorporate it into the overall progression. In other words, it wouldn't sound like a cadence at all. Okay, so now we know where we're going to go in terms of our bass line, as well as our chords. We're going to probably do this for 3. Now, we might end up down here. We'll see what octave we want that in. But we know we want F sharp going to be in this. Okay, we'll see how that, what octave we want. Now let's start it out. So we'll come to the beginning. We can keep using our knowledge of what goes into these chords. We're dealing with a minor 1 chord, but still the content is the same. That's still going to be the scale degrees 1, 3, and 5. So when I find scale degree 3 up top, I'll say, okay, well, I need to use a tonic chord for that, not a dominant chord. So I'll put in my 1. Doesn't necessarily have to be in root position to kick it off, but it very well can be. And I see this motion, 3 down to 1, and I could use this as a chance for a voice exchange. Notice that if it's 3 and 1, then I need 1 and 1 harmonically there on the downbeats. So, if I start with a root position 1, I could end up coming up to here and doing a voice exchange. Add some passing motion in the bass. And maybe I'll turn that into a chord as well. In fact, let's go ahead and do that. But I could just harmonize this whole chunk of music with just tonic, and that would be an individual passing tone. Now, if I turn it into a chord, this is actually a tricky thing because, well, with our limitations right now, this chord is an impossibility. That'd be the natural thing to do. You'd say, okay, well, I've got scale degree 2 here. I can't harmonize it with 1. I'd have to use a dominant. So, because of the rules of the game here, we've said we're going to use tonic and dominant. So I'm stuck with a dominant chord. Now, when you try and fill in this chord, you say, okay, I need a root, F sharp, I need an A sharp, I need a C sharp, and I need a... Okay, so I need, to make this chord happen, I need all 4 of those notes. But then, if I've used C sharp twice, I'll have to omit one of those other notes. I'll have to omit an E or an F sharp or an A sharp. I can't do that and still have it be a 5-4-3. So that's going to pose a problem. If we were freed up a little bit, this is the chord that we'll use in the future for a situation like this. They sound very much the same. So the 7 diminished 6 will do the same job as a 5-4-3. But for the moment, given that we're in Unit 1 and we're only using tonic and dominant, we don't have that possibility, and we don't have this possibility either if we keep this bass note. But what if I were to say, okay, let me do something a little bit fancier. I'll jump up to an E there. Now I'm not doubling that note, and I'm free to do this, 5-4-2. Now how did I know it's 5-4-2 so quickly? Well, you know this too because you've memorized that scale degree 4 in the bass with a dominant makes a 5-4-2. If you remember that chart we came up with a while back. Okay, now once I do this, I'll have a 1-6 on the second downbeat. Let's make that. Yeah. Great, we've got to start. Now we just need to get to our goal, this half cadence, the 5 there. Leading tone, that's obvious. We need a dominant of some kind there. And then, you know, it's really tempting. You're probably thinking scale degree 4 to 5, that's a perfect spot for a predominant chord. But since we don't have a 4 or a 2 or any of those other chords on the table right now, we only have 1s and 5s, we'll have to treat this as a passing tone. Just think, if we turned this into a dominant, if we did this, first off, you wouldn't have any harmonic change into the half cadence, and that would sound really awkward. It would not. You want to, as a general rule, you want to change chords across downbeats. The bar line looks like a bar line on the page, but the way you hear it as a bar line is because there's some change that occurs across it. So we don't want to have 5 twice. We want to change across that bar line. The other problem, though, well, you know, you might say, okay, we'll scratch this. Let's do this. Still, the problem remains. You get rid of that bass note. The problem, a certain problem remains. This E, given this chord, is F sharp, A sharp, C sharp, E. There it is. The chordal 7th. So, chordal 7th needs to resolve, and it resolves not up, but down. If we harmonize this E with a 5-7 chord, the chordal 7th would not resolve, so we have to scratch it and go back to the drawing board. Okay, so we get rid of that. We need our cadence, so we need the 5. So we need a different chord to move into that 5. We'll treat the E as a passing tone and say, hey, let's come at it from a 1 chord. Both of these notes, 1 and 3, are going to fit within this chord, and the one note that doesn't fit will be a passing tone. And that we can state that as a general principle. You want to make sure that when you're harmonizing a melody, every note belongs to a chord that you've chosen to harmonize it with, or can be explained as a passing tone, or a neighbor tone, or some other kind of embellishment. And one other very important principle is that if the way you harmonize it, a certain note becomes a tendency tone, it needs to resolve. If a note like this were to have been a chordal 7th, due to our harmonization of it, we would have had a problem here. That does not work. You have to make sure that if you turn a note into a chordal 7th by your harmonization, that it can resolve. And it does resolve. All right, now, we haven't decided what inversions or anything. All I know is that I want to pick notes from these 2 chords. We've been alluding to this, but just to lay it out, let's put the 7th in there too. We don't need it. But the chordal 7th is possible. So once I've chosen these chords, I have a certain set of notes that I can pick from when I'm designing my bass, when I'm composing my bass line. So I'm mainly looking for a good counterpoint again, but I'm a little more restrained when I'm working with a bass because I need to fit certain chords and make sure I provide good support for them. Well, what if we came on down like this? Or if I want to avoid, I'm creating an octave here. Let's see what we've got, 6. I could put another 6th here. Ooh, well, that opens up the possibility of doing this. Another voice exchange. Okay. I like that. This will be a dissonance, a fourth. Remember, fourths are dissonant in counterpoint. Okay. Right away, just having that third makes me realize that I'm going to be able to easily add a passing tone in here. So I can take care of this priority, this goal of ours to work in some passing motion. I can do that right here. Okay. Now I'm just going to make sure that I've got the right figures to go with these choices of bass note. We had already dealt with these, but let's start here. We've got 5 with scale degree 2 in the bass. You should know right away what that is now. 4, 3. 1 with a 1 chord with scale degree 3 in the bass makes a 1, 6. And it changes to a 5, 3 there. We've done our first phrase in terms of the bass and the chords. Let's tackle this next one. Now notice when this change happens up top in the soprano, we get an E, and that changes the nature of this chord to some degree. We end up with a 7th, and so that's 7th of the chord. 4th, 7th resolves down by step. That's all good. It's taken care of for us. Now we're ready to start a new phrase. Maybe we'll start on 1 in the bass and harmonize it with a 1 chord. Well, I'm just on a kick with these voice exchanges. I can see the potential here for another one. Now, we don't have to, but we'll try that out. Look, we have another possibility here. We've got, for a voice exchange, we've got the leading tone and scale degree 2. Those belong to the 5 chord. So we know we're going to have to change chords to 5 here. If we take the idea of a voice exchange, it means we'll use these same notes, but in the opposite order. We'll say, okay, we'll do C sharp, and we get the right value. And here's my leading tone. Notice they've swapped. The two outer parts have swapped notes. So the leading tone ends up here in the bass and now can resolve there. So as soon as I pick the A sharp of the bass, it needs to resolve. All right, so figures, let's see what's going on here. Oh, and also this. There's a resolution there implied. First inversion. Okay, we got scale degree 2 in the bass. That makes 5. 4, 3. Leading tone in the bass makes 5, 6, 5. Now notice how I'm doing this. The Roman numeral does not need to be rewritten because that 1 holds out for the whole measure. This 5 holds out for the whole measure as well. All I'm doing with the figures is showing, well, the bass changed. The chord didn't, but the bass did, and so that changes the figures. I like to be very sparing with my Roman numerals and only write them once. Sometimes it's good to be lazy. Okay, now, that looks like a pretty decent bass line. That spot bothers me just a little bit. And the reason, I think, is that this is an octave between the parts. This is great in terms of setting a cadence. The stability of that interval helps make it sound like an arrival point. But the issue is that we're going in similar motion to it. And that it just sounds stronger and better if we can do contrary motion. I'm going to replace that F sharp with this F sharp, and now we'll be moving contrary motion, by contrary motion, into the octave, and I think that'll sound a little bit better. 1.